So, good afternoon. I'm joined by Adam Coyle, the CEO of Digital River. Adam has had an impressive career in financial services with Vantiv, now FIS and First Data, now Fiserv, among others, and served on the boards and with several VC and private equity houses, and is currently CEO of Digital River. Adam, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
All right. So Digital River founded, in the last century, 1994, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I guess one of the founding fathers of cross-border commerce, covering
Very
both
true.
digital and physical goods. And then I'm sure I'm missing a lot of bits in between.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time trying to convince people we're not the company that they might remember from 1994. But we've gone through a tremendous transformation over the past 5 years to really completely fundamentally rewrite our technology stack and refocus the business, which historically had been so I'll call it an end-to-end full stack e-commerce player, to really being, as we like to say, the integrated solution for global brands who want to sell globally. Integrated back-end solution, excuse me, for brands who want to sell around the world. And our business really today focuses on all of that stuff that happens after you hit the buy button on an e-commerce website. We focus largely on brands who sell direct to consumers. And we work really across what I like to call the 6 dimensions of e-commerce. That's both business to business and business to consumer, B2B to B2C. Both onshore, people who want to sell through distribution and have localized inventory, and cross-border, and both physical goods and digital goods. And we're one of the few people, I think, that can say that they cover all of those with equal capability.
Yeah, completely agreed. I think doing digital, you cannot count them on the fingers of one hand. But I think the combination of physical and digital, I think you come to the fingers of one hand, particularly in all those dimensions.
Yeah.
All right. So looking back at 2020, and you already referred to it a little bit. What did you see? What are your observations on both B2B and B2C?
Well, it was let's just say 2020 was a year to both remember and to forget for all of us. But I think it was really a watershed year for e-commerce across all dimensions, and particularly across all those dimensions. When the world started going on to lockdowns in the early spring, we saw a tremendous shift in the priorities of our clients, as well as consumer behaviors. And just from a general basis, I think what we have seen and realized is that consumers have shifted their behavior. Consumers who historically perhaps had shopped online but hadn't shopped direct from a manufacturer before, were forced through necessity in many cases, either because that brand's products were not deemed essential and were not being delivered by a marketplace, or because scarcity made their products very hard to find. Consumers were forced to the brand's direct sites and began purchasing from them. And we've seen this sort of, I think, permanent shift of behavior, where more and more consumers, instead of going perhaps to a marketplace, are going for the products that they already know and love and know that they need. They're going to go direct to the brand. So we've seen this consumer behavior shift. And at the same time, we've also seen a shift in the minds, I think, of brands and people that sell online directly, which is the realization that they can't worry perhaps as much about channel conflict. They need to have this direct consumer touch point. So the combination of those things kind of coming together, I think, has set up for a permanent long-term shift in how businesses think about going to market. Retail will always have its place. Marketplaces will always have their place. But the rise of the direct-to-customer channel, I think, is a trend that's started or got its real kickstart in 2020 and will remain with us for forever.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Any countries or regions that stood out in particular, sort of swingings or ups or downs?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Really, we saw strong demand across all the regions, even regions that you arguably were more affected, and regions that were less affected. Interestingly, in places where the COVID virus was particularly acute, we actually saw stronger activity in those places than we would have ever expected. You would think with economies shut down and things like that, you would have seen some, runoff of business, but demand there was particularly strong for products that you might not even suspect were, in demand. Similarly, in places that weren't affected, I think they caught on to the whole e-commerce buzz around the world. And we saw strong demand in those economies as well. So it's hard to make generalizations because I think demand was strong around the world. Clearly in verticals, and particularly in the verticals that we serve, I mean, we're very strong in consumer electronics. We saw amazing demand there, obviously, as people began to refresh their computer setups for work from home. They webcams and mice and remote and wireless keyboards and things were obviously very, very popular. As well as things in like the gaming categories and stuff, as people were looking for stuff to do as they were tied to their home base.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to add to that, actually, one of the other speakers was referring to that, and he was mentioning Brazil specifically, with GDP down 8%.
Yeah.
E-commerce rose 40 or 50%. So very much in line with your observation, which typically would be an economy where you'd have question marks.
Yep, absolutely.
And you already mentioned that the emergence of marketplaces. Is that also, and you already said it, you pulled apart the tightly knit stack of technologies. Yeah. Is that where your headless commerce strategy is coming into play and is really benefiting you additionally?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing with the marketplaces is the evolution of the market, the e-commerce market as a whole. Brands are getting more sophisticated about how they view the various channels. I think in the past, historically, we saw e-commerce as all one thing, and it's becoming far more nuanced. Consumers are becoming far more sophisticated and nuanced in their approach to the market as well, and realize that the marketplaces have a place, but there's also a place for the direct-to-customer channel. And that's what's evolving, as I think our common understanding of how we shop online is changing. The marketplaces are always going to be powerful and have a very important, and obviously we've seen tremendous growth from them as a source for distributing certain types of goods, as a source to acquire new consumers. But increasingly what we see is that brands are recognizing that they need to migrate those customers who have discovered their products to a direct channel where they can provide a higher level of service, a higher level of brand affinity, if you will, and a stronger direct relationship with the customer. That's there are some categories of goods that I think will always be very well suited for the marketplaces, much like they're perhaps are well suited for retail. But there's also categories that will be really well suited for the direct to customer channel. I mean, we've seen Nike, do that. Obviously, is probably the best example. And I was reading statistics earlier, a month or so ago, that said that their business was just exponentially through the roof.
Yeah, exactly. It was in the Financial Times, I think, this weekend. I read it. It's back to normal levels, thanks to online sales and a combination of direct and marketplaces, but mainly direct. So on the brands, at the end of 2020, you launched an accelerator, or even 3 accelerator programs for brands in 2020, and perhaps it's too early, but could you share some insights as to why you did that, and particularly any results or observations you can share from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is the trend toward this trend towards direct to consumer has inspired brands, I think, to rethink their e-commerce presence and really look for newer and better solutions as they sort of evolve out of, being, perhaps, the evolution is I set up a little store online and I just sell locally to, I migrate to a marketplace, which gives me broader reach, to eventually I want to develop a direct to customer channel as I get larger and have a more larger presence. I think as brands get into that stage, they're looking for the opportunity to migrate off the marketplace, or perhaps migrate off a full stack e-commerce solution, a full end-to-end e-commerce solution, and create something that's truly differentiated. But they may not be ready to go all in on a multi-million-dollar e-commerce implementation. And the accelerators are really intended to really capture that market. Brands who are getting too big for the marketplace presence and too big and want some differentiation from what's offered by the full stack e-commerce solutions, but aren't quite ready to do the full intense implementation. This gives them a very customizable, very differentiated solution that's packaged in a way that makes it very easy for them to consume and very low cost to get started with a truly differentiated e-commerce solution. And then ultimately, we see them as they get bigger and bigger and become global brands. They move into solutions that are far more bespoke. And we have, we obviously plug into all the major ecosystems for those customers' needs as well.
Yeah, so you can grow, or they can grow with you, or you can grow with them.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about helping them get online and really provide a differentiated consumer experience that meets the needs of their particular business and their particular consumers. As you think about it, as I like to say, the experience you have when you go to a fashion website and buy something is very different than the experience you have if you go to an auto parts website.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
How important are partnerships for you, sort of in the last 12 to 18 months, but also going forward?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, partnerships are, as this market is evolving, as we said, is the e-commerce called services or delivery market evolves. Increasingly, there's a place for the full stack solutions, but as you start to move up the stack, your brands people want to put the best of breed solutions together. And partnerships are a necessity, if you're a provider of one of those solutions, you inherently have to work with the other pieces because nobody just buys a piece, right? They buy it to put it together with a whole. Yeah. So we see, obviously having good relationships with the other providers in the space, as well as the systems integrators, the people who put those solutions together, are kind of critical. And finding the teams that can kind of work together well and work together seamlessly is a big part of what we're focused on. And I think what we'll see the industry continue to evolve in. We like to take the belief that e-commerce is an ecosystem and that there are many parties who have to interact to truly deliver a great solution that's customized and unique to the needs of a particular business. And we very much take that approach and have been very active in the last couple of years cultivating our relationships with different providers in that space, whether that's a fulfillment logistics provider or whether that's a customer experience provider.
Many partnerships, they center around a certain ecosystem.
Yeah.
Is that also something you're focusing on? And is there a specific sort of first among equals ecosystem you're focusing on?
Yeah, that's a great question because the ecosystems each have their own personalities and their own things. I mean, generally the ecosystems seem to center around the commerce solution. And you have obviously things like the Magento ecosystem or the Salesforce ecosystem or the SAP ecosystem or the Shopify ecosystem. And they all have a place to play. Understanding how you operate in each of those ecosystems and what's unique about them and how you need to operate in them is a lot of the secret of being successful, I think, in this marketplace, particularly for someone like us, who's going to operate in those ecosystems with other players. And they all have their own personalities, and they all have their own unique aspects that are, that make them different. And that's part of the richness I think we're seeing develop in the e-commerce industry is that there are all these solutions out there, and that brands just need a path to be able to find them and find the solution that's going to work best for them. That's really getting back to the why we got into the accelerator programs last year.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, completely agree with that. So an important part of your solution and an important part of your effort in helping clients go global, but also go local, is payments. We've seen a tremendous amount of change and innovation in payments. How hard is it? Even for you as somebody with a strong and deep payments background, but how hard is it for you and the organization to keep up and also prioritize with all these changes.
Yeah. I mean, you and I are both well versed in the payments industry, and it's been an interesting career because the new payment types that come up all the time. It is challenging. I mean, to keep up, and there's a fine line to be drawn between when you include a new payment type, and it's the chicken or the egg problem. It says, do I add the payment type to get the volume, or do I wait for the volume to come before I add the payment type? But keeping on top of that stuff is critical. I mean, we do see some big trends globally that we're obviously investing in. Things like the buy now, pay later, which I think sort of exploded in the last year. Or a year and a half. Well, there are players that have certainly been around longer than that, but it really became to the forefront, I think, in 2020. We see a lot of demand for that with players like, Klarna really pushing heavily into the United States, with PayPal coming out with its offering. Yeah, in addition to some of the incumbents, the natives that were, like the Affirms and others of the world, the Afterpays. So that has been a real trend as people look for a different way to essentially buy on credit, right? I think our notions of how we buy on credit are changing with the millennial generation. They have a different view of things. They're very tech first, and technology has made a lot of this stuff available. The other big trend we see is in the B2B space, where actually, back to the question of, what happened in 2020, I think 2020 was the wake up year for a lot of B2B sellers to realize that they needed a direct to customer online channel, and that marketplaces don't really serve them well. I mean, there are some specialized marketplaces for their goods and services that are evolving, that are very interesting around manufacturing and things like that. And we'll see how that goes. But that's still a very new market. And, what we saw is a lot of B2B sellers express real interest in having a direct customer channel. And obviously they need different payment types. They have the history, just the dynamics of the B2B marketplace demands, that sellers extend credit to their buyers, in the form of an invoice. And that's something we've invested in as well in 2020.
Yeah, and I think in B2B, even before being able to issue an invoice, you have a procure to pay process.
Oh yeah,
and you may need to issue a PO number, etc., etc.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, simply from a process perspective, a different animal.
Yeah. The other, I'll just chime in on one last thing I said, is the other thing that's kind of come up that's kind of an interesting development to watch is the advent, as I've talked about in the past, of open banking. And obviously that's particularly strong in Europe. It's coming to the US, sort of, where we have a little bit of a different view on what constitutes open banking. And I think you'll see it permeate the world. But I think that'll have a big impact on how we think about how we pay, as new systems kind of get developed around the open banking. All the technology that's being built around the open banking concept. So
yeah, exactly. I think it's good to remember that open banking is an umbrella term for a couple of developments.
Yeah.
Take Pix in Brazil, which is more instant payments. And even though Europe talks a lot about open banking and things like instant payments, it's not entirely a reality yet in all of Europe.
No.
So let's as Europeans, let's not get ahead of ourselves from that perspective. But indeed, I do think that will that will spread and that will grow internationally.
Yeah.
Another thing we see a lot is the growing importance of developers in sales cycles, and you already alluded to that a little bit with millennials being tech savvy.
Yeah.
Has that made you reconsider sales processes and, for instance, focus more on tech savvy sales staff, or even sort of driven by client demand?
Yeah, we have invested a lot to build, continue to update and evolve our developer tools, because I think you're right. I mean, in this world where we're inherently networked, through ecosystems, where the ecosystems create these environments where, you're by definition plugging and playing solutions together, so that you can create a very customized solution for your business's needs and your clients. The ability and the need to, the influence that the developer, broadly kind of conceived, has in the sales process, it grows exponentially, because they want solutions that are going to, first and foremost, work for their client. They want to know that it's going to work when they get it done. And number two, it's going to be relatively easy to implement. And that's something we have invested a lot in creating solutions that are going to be easy for the developers, whether that's an in-house developer at a client who's doing it themselves, or whether that's a systems integrator who's been hired to basically put together a solution for someone. We want to provide them the tools that they need, the documentation, the know-how, to put that solution together. Now, repeatability obviously has benefits, and the fact that you've put it together once in an ecosystem, or once or twice or 10 times an ecosystem, makes things obviously always easier. But we also want to be able to, have the tools necessary. You have to have the tools necessary for the guy who's just starting out with a solution in an ecosystem or an environment you've never worked in before. And I think you're going to see a lot more focus on that. There's obviously people who are enablers in that space. Companies like MuleSoft, just as one example, who focus on making it easy to plug disparate systems together. But companies are going to continue to need to invest in the tools themselves to make it easy for developers, whether they're third parties or in-house, to plug systems together, because that's just the way it's going to go. You're going to see increasing specialization and increasing capabilities delivered through apps, and whether it's an open banking solution, or it's a a product catalog solution. Oh yeah, a big trend. Yeah.
No, exactly. Agreed. It's a collection of apps that makes the solution in many cases.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Last but not least, putting you on the spot a little bit, but could you share a prediction with us? What do you think we'll see in 2021?
Yeah.
Will this commerce and online continue? Will we see people flock back to the stores?
I'll give you my personal view. And I think that when a lot of the COVID restrictions are finally lifted, I think you're going to see a lot of people flock to cruise lines and hotels, because I think we're all getting tired of this. But I think for retail, I think we're strong believers that we have seen a permanent shift, and I can tell you that our clients are strong believers that they've seen a permanent shift. What was really interesting about 2020, in hindsight, is the fact that not only did consumer behavior change, and we believe it's changed permanently, because consumers were forced to find ways to buy that they hadn't done before, and they realized that they're convenient and easy and they're not going back. But the other thing that really changed was the mindset of a lot of our customers. People who thought, well, I have this direct to customer channel and that's good, and that's one piece of it. They now realize that that is their most strategic channel, that they have to have it and they have to invest in it. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of people investing in it. If you've already started investing, they're going to invest more. And if they haven't really started investing, you're going to see those guys really start investing. And that's going to cut across all aspects of e-commerce. B2C, obviously, we're all familiar with that, but I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of B2B e-commerce investment. And businesses, when we went in, to lockdowns, I mean, they had to basically keep doing business without being face to face. And I think we kind of got used to that. And if you're a B2B buyer, you might have found that it was way more efficient to buy, through website review, through Zoom meetings and things like that, rather than having people come on site and having to take your day and things like. I think you're going to see we've seen a fundamental shift. So we are huge believers that this is something that's going to stick with us. How much that's going to stick with us over the bump is going to depend greatly on what vertical you're in, and I think that, but the shift of share is permanent, both B2B, B2C, And it's something that we'll have to we'll see a continued investment in 2021, and I think some really exciting stuff will come out of it.
Excellent. All right, great insights, Adam. Thank you very much. As always, a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as always. Thanks to everybody who's watching.
Thank you.